Hi everyone. I think we're going to kick off this morning's session. Just to ask, if you are not speaking, won't you mute yourself? We are looking forward to an interesting session. This is my I've been privileged to attend a couple of the Urban Festival sessions, and I've really been enjoying them. Let me tell you a bit more about the Urban Festival. It's a series of virtual engagements hosted by the South African Cities Network, Civic Tech Innovation Network, the Department of Cooperative Governments and Traditional Affairs, Open Cities Lab, FITS Journalism and Media Lab, Our Future Cities, and ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability. The festival is running for the whole month of October, culminating in World Cities Day, which is on the 31st. We've been given this poem by Emma Mabia to start, and I'm going to be playing it for us.
Dreams onto pottery, crocheted algorithmic patterns onto garments that we grew into. This was the original digital technology, a reflection of our artistic expression. In a world as big as one's imagination, made smaller by tech, we're brought together by clouds and streams. For even networks know the strength of connectivity, as we do the power of human connection. Africans, our imagination ruled the world. By it, worlds advanced. New methods demand new forms, so we morphed. From mud huts to skyscrapers, from Morse code to binary code. Where coding for girls is not sacrilegious, but said with the same simplicity as a makeup tutorial. Yes, a tomorrow where girls are lining coding like lining makeup, hacking bro codes, breaking barriers. Background has never birthed intelligence and talent, nor be they the DNA of privilege. If you can dream it, you can code it. Debug and refactor with every binary, not restricted by a mouse, keyboard, or data. Be it in a leafy suburb, downtown CBD, or the township. Creativity, your currency, your mind, a mine. With evolution, the true never changes. We just dance to it differently. Memory is stored in feeling. This flow is innate. There is no mathematics to the sound. But we have always known this. Rhythm is more in action than in thought, in its playing out than its scripting. Some have called it mysticism. I call it the resurrection of our ancestors who art in heaven through our images of unborn things, our words, sensations, song and dance, an embrace of Urban Festival 2020, an embodiment of the ideal.
And we're going to introduce our speakers. Well, I'm going to introduce the topic, and then I'm going to go into the speakers. So, in this complex and changing world, how do we really empower and activate all of our society to consciously to participate in the transformation of South Africa's cities and towns? This year's Urban Festival is themed Empowering the Civic, and it's an exploration into how the physical and virtual world can be harnessed to engage people in reimagining and shaping their own cities, both in these strange and uncertain COVID-19 pandemic times and into the future. The relationship between people and their governments has always been critical to building a responsive and vibrant society, and is the bedrock of South Africa's democracy, given our past. And today, with the global pandemic that has been thrust upon our lives, it's an even more urgent reality. Today, Cara, Reilly, David van Niekerk, and I'm Alan Cameron, will be speaking on the role of people in places, where the users of these spaces are getting meaningfully involved to make them more relevant. Cara is going to be kicking us off with a short intro presentation, after which David, then myself, and then back to Cara, We'll each introduce ourselves and discuss a project that we are involved in. If you have any questions, please type them out in the comments so long. We're hoping for a nice time of Q&A at the end. All the Urban Festival presentations are recorded and they are available on the website. And obviously, please feel free to advertise this session on your social media, hashtag Urban Festival 2020 or at Cities Network or at Our Future Cities. So Cara, over to you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Let me get started here, just as a little intro session. My name is Cara Reilly, and I just wanted to start this session with some thinking around place and posing the question, what makes places great? For the better part of 15 years, I've been trying to understand what makes a great place through the work that I've been doing in precinct management, and specifically in economic nodes where the focus is on the commercial, the municipal, business and owner interests. And obviously with all good professions, we need models and codes and matrices and measures that tell us what management should look like, how design should arrange its spaces, and what the measures of the inputs and the outputs should be so that we can track and analyze and benchmark, and rightly so. Locality and design are critical, analytics count, and having clear measurables for hardcore place management, it really does make all the difference. But there's an emphasis lacking in all these models. It's something that it's alluded to, but it's not focused on. Not in our planning, not in our setup, not in our budgeting of places, and their management structures in particular. It's a fundamental element that defines places. It's the user, or as the right wing call them, the people. So how is this possible? Well, it's simple because nobody asks them up front. They are only considered when it comes to marketing or eventing, or when spaces become economically stunted and we need a turnaround, or when they really start making a big, big noise. The employee, the tourist, the resident, the homeless, the shopper, the commuter, the scholar, the skateboarder, the loiterer, all these people in our places and our spaces, they sit at in the top of this place management hierarchy, kind of snuggled in this nirvana of placemaking. And the problem with placing people at such lofty heights is that it requires a really special effort to reach them. And honestly, once you get sucked into the hygiene of place management, the voice of the people quickly becomes very, very hard to listen to, too expensive to buy in, and honestly not necessary for those already stretched precincts and their management teams. And then, surprise, surprise, we are forced to listen to them. And as suspected, they become the unwanted thorn we have to problem solve around. We have to re-engineer our spaces. We have to retrofit award-winning design. We have to reallocate budget, these for really comfortable seating, and we have to overhaul our marketing strategies. So maybe we must ask, maybe we need to make the invisible visible by using the lens of what people want and what they need to inform what we have assumed, allowing for people-led anything from boardwalks and canteens to online platforms and products. It really allows for the magic to happen. Looking with empathy allows you to enter a scale of value that cannot be reached on your own as a leader or a planner or a head of department or indeed a place. It's getting down with the people that gives insight into what is and what might be. And why is it important? 7.7 billion reasons, really. People are everywhere, as we've learned in the last few months with COVID. They're across every layer of every industry, and people matter. They have the ability to add value that can impact and can result in opportunities. But to do this, we've got to enable people. We've got to make them believe that when we ask them and when they give input, that input actually has value. But this is not a tick box, lip service, desktop exercise. This really is getting down into like a warts and all, laid bare, deep dive, people-led approach, asking the questions that are really difficult to hear the answers to. It's the kind that goes beyond just asking too. It's deliberately linking the inputs of what is being said with the outputs of what is being planned or developed. It's the kind that resonates across the senses in a way that you just can't quite put your finger on. It's the kind that starts with people. It's the kind that makes places great. So that is just for the intro for now. Back to you, Alan.
Thank you, Cara. David, we're going to jump straight to you. Why don't you introduce yourself and yeah, take us through what you have to say this morning.
Thanks, Alan. I'm here today in my capacity as the CEO of the Johannesburg Inner City Partnership, and I'd like to share some work with you, some exciting work that started just before the lockdown and through the lockdown and is now continuing. Just give me a moment to share the screen. Okay, so just perhaps to briefly say how the JICP fits in for those that are not aware of us. We are a NGO, a non-profit company, but we have a partnership agreement with the city of Joburg since 2015, and all of the work that we do is, to support the city in terms of the inner city roadmap. So then, what is a walkable network? I thought that's probably a good place to start with, seeing that this is the project that I'm sharing with you. It's the Johannesburg Walkable Network. It's a package of interventions by different stakeholders, as Cara just indicated, a whole variety of stakeholders. So it's a package of interventions in targeted streets and public spaces aimed at safe, clean and welcome experience. So it consists of, there are hundreds, if not thousands, kinds of different interventions, but this is one way of categorizing them. Development activation, so all the kinds of activation you can think of, security, traffic, emergency management, and then cleaning, recycling, repairs, and maintenance. So, at the different scales of the pyramid that Cara showed, you'll find some of these things. For some other reason, the slide is not moving. So just to give you a sense of when we talk about activation, just obviously public art is big. This one, by the way, in the top, in the bottom right is in October, along the Walkable Network in Fox Street, the Jewel City development opened, and this beautiful mural was done by De Bongs, an upcoming artist in Joburg. Then just, some public art. You can see some pedestrianization, street furniture, all of these things that are then imagined to be done in the Walkable Network. Hopefully some comfortable seating, intersection treatment, very important, in terms of accidents and other factors. Just some pictures to give an idea what we mean by a walkable network. And by the way, the walkable network is not about full pedestrianization. It does also include partial pedestrianization. In other words, slightly widening a sidewalk or perhaps removing some of the obstacles that we find in sidewalks. So just to give you a sense, I think we're all quite familiar. This again was the opening of Jewel City, and you can see Fox Street here has been completely, fully pedestrianized. Cycling also forming part of the walkable network. And this is just to show some of the stuff happening in Maboneng, the involvement of the community, extremely important. So then why have a walkable network? Well, firstly, it's about inner city decline and regenerating the inner city, and then also understanding that because of the huge resource gap that we have, especially now and even before COVID, we cannot do everything at once. So the principle of spatial targeting, in other words, of identifying certain streets in a particular way, and then over time, the theory is that not only these streets, but the streets surrounding them will gradually improve. Just then also on the why, this is what the JICP stands for in its support of the city's inner city roadmap, clean, safe, and welcoming not to only one or two stakeholders, but all of those stakeholders that you see there listed on the screen. I'm not going to take you through this. This is our JICP theory of change. I just want to point out that over here, you'll see a walkable network. So it's a very important component in our pursuit to, together with the city, to work towards a productive, inclusive, livable, sustainable inner city. Process-wise, I mentioned we start in February. We have an inner city think tank, which consists of strategic players in the city. The concept of Walkable Network was agreed there. We did some street selection in 2 workshops in March and July, and we're now busy with implementation via the Village East Precinct Partnership, which is a partnership that was set up by the JICP and other stakeholders in the southeastern part of the inner city. So it's below the railway line, for those that are familiar. It includes Mabaneng and the area between Mabaneng and Absa Carlton Centre, more or less, if that gives you an idea. Stakeholders that have been involved in the concept was the inner city think tank, a prep team consisting of the city, the JDA, the JICP, and some consultants who gave their time freely, which we're very thankful for. Then on street selection, in the workshops, we then had these stakeholders. And then in terms of implementation, there's a working group that has been set up consisting of all of these stakeholders, including the Village East Precinct Partnership that I mentioned, and in civil society. I think this is, we have started including civil society, but as we go on and the exercise becomes, more on the ground, we would like to involve as many possible of, faith-based organizations, schools, community groupings, etc. So how did we do this? We had a methodology in terms of selecting these particular streets, the spatial targeting that I was referring to. We said, let's protect the key mobility routes. Let's map the strategic origin destination flows of people, of walking. Let's then map a walkable grid that optimizes these flows, that's aligned to public transport routes, and considers the city's transport planning that's happening now in parallel to this process. So the city of Johannesburg is busy with the inner city transport master plan. Then to look at micro linkages. So for instance, if we've mapped the grid, also then do some links to places of interest, tourist facilities, etc. And then agree on the pilot, because obviously, once again, we can't start with the whole network. Let's do that in a pilot fashion. So I'm just going to briefly show these, for instance, with the mobility routes. These are the origin destination. To give an example, this is Park Station with a link to Wits in the morning peak. Also a link to some of the, Standard Bank, for instance, FNB, and then also from the residences such as Hillbrow residential clusters to Park Station, to, for instance, the public transport facilities. So this was an important aspect. We also then looked at these other criteria. We wanted to cover the whole of the inner city, not only the commercial core, where there's a lot of, strong established businesses. We wanted to have a grid spacing of more or less 400 meters, and then consider these factors. We also weighted these factors. Obviously, the access points of public transport facilities are extremely important. We looked at pedestrian density. We looked at public transport routes. We looked at destination clusters, where people were, and that, links to the origin and destination modeling that we did. We also then looked at projects, those that are existing and planned, through streets, single streets, and where there were intersection accidents. So these are just some of the key public transport routes. And I'm just showing you for concept. There's no time to actually go into them. We looked at in 2010, there was some NMT modeling that was done. We looked at that. We looked at the pedestrian densities. And then, the micro linkages were also mapped. So this all then culminated in the Walkable Network, which you see in front of you. You'll see in red 6 east-west routes, and then north-south, you'll see 7 north-south routes. And you'll see some of the micro linkages. That, for instance, is the Nelson Mandela Walk that's being planned at the moment. Yeah, Small Street Mall, etc. The link to UJ, that kind of thing. So this is the Walkable Network. We also looked together with, the planning that was happening, or still happening as part of the inner city transport master plan. How does this link wider than the inner city? And you'll find here the Walkable Network in red, and then linking with, the rest of the city. We then said, well, let's identify a pilot. Let's look at urban management. Where are there SIDs, for instance, or voluntary management initiatives? Because obviously where there are stakeholders, let's actually go there first. Where are there projects that are, dealing with ground floor activation? Once again, let's look at the pedestrian densities. Let's look at existing pedestrian projects and also transport facilities. This is just it's a bit of a messy slide, so apologies for that, but these are the different SIDs, or voluntary management initiatives in Joburg. So that was one of the layers, and then those other layers were mentioned. And we then agreed on Main Street from the Magistrates Court, Gandhi Square, Dogleg into Fox Street, all the way to Jeppe Station, and here from Gandhi Square up to Jabir Park, doglegging into Rissik, right up to the metro center. So this is the pilot that was agreed based on the criteria. And then in terms of the second phase, what we did is we said, let's identify those main destinations that we have in the inner city, and how does the pilot route, the one in red, then link to those destinations? So that would be phase 2. And then, as I said earlier on, there's also the longer term, the longer term development and the linkage to the rest of the city beyond the inner city. So one of the components that we, in terms of the way forward, is to look at existing projects and to forge alignment with them. And here we have the Johannesburg International Transport Initiative, Interchange, sorry, the Main Street pedestrianisation. These 2 projects already on the go, the Literary District and the High Court precinct. These are 2 projects that are in planning stage. Implementation has not started. Just to show you, this is the High Court with the recommendations. There's no time to go into detail. This is Jitty, obviously in construction at this time. These are all along the Walkable Network. Main Street pedestrianisation, that's happening. And in the Lit District, there's a variety of activations that will take place there. So in terms of the way forward, it's to align with these existing projects, as I've said, to proceed with quick wins, to establish task teams around those 3 components of the Walkable Network, to finalize phasing and refine the routes together with the master plan planning, to get a catchy name, a brand that can be more catchy than Walkable Network, and then also to discuss with the city and stakeholders, traders, just to look at informal trading demarcation, so that it actually incorporates integrated design that protects walkability and also then considers the potential for market development. So thanks everyone, that is my presentation.
Thank you very much, David. It's my turn now, and after which Cara is also going to have a brief case study presentation, and then we're going to have time for Q&A and discussion afterwards. My presentation is more fine-grained, as they say. Let me just work out the screen sharing quick. I'm going to be talking about Reik-Tilbach Square, but to get there, I'm going to use a case study, which you'll see now. So let me share the screen. Okay. So to start off, I wanted us to use our imaginations a little bit. Imagine a beautiful public space improving every year. How is it managed? How is it maintained? Imagine it being maintained by people who love it, using the funds raised on it. Now, the fact is that public space is intentionally planned and designed into the urban form to create common areas for us to all share and enjoy. I'm sure we're familiar with this. Obviously, the physical and psychological health benefits we could see clearly when we didn't have them, especially during COVID. They also link to the quicker capital growth of adjacent properties. A classic example of this quicker growth is Central Park. There's a virtuous cycle in the park which is accepted as fact. The Central Park effect comes out, I think, every other year. And in 2014, there was a study done by a local estate agent who found that Fifth Avenue apartments with a view of the park were selling at 75% more than those without a view. And the view was the difference. Conversely, there are unintended consequences to the loss of public space. So for a variety of reasons and for some time, local municipalities have been mostly unable to keep public spaces optimally functional with the help of nearby private and civic interests. The move is most obviously seen in the broad brushstrokes that the improvement districts give to their environment. So we saw some CIDs in Joburg in the previous presentation. At last count, Cape Town has 43 SIDs. However, SIDs are excluded from various municipal facilities like parks, sports grounds, even shared public parking areas. As an example of the type of lost opportunities that this demonstrates to the city of Cape Town in particular, I've heard it said that Cape Town CBD's property growth has been along the streets maintained by their improvement districts and not around the public spaces from which they are excluded. So First Thursday in the CBD is a story of Bree Street and not Rubik Square. Developers don't feel confident marketing ready access to public spaces as an advantage to prospective buyers. I was on the plane to Durban in January and I came across this magazine. It was the British Airways magazine. And here's an advert for residential properties in London, advertising the public realm as an asset. While in the same magazine, the Cape Town properties boast about motorized access and independence from municipal services. Cape Town's communities are often forced to enjoy safe open spaces in privately managed environments, in this case, the V&A. There is an unintended consequence of expecting municipal departments to operate a city's public spaces in the best interest of their users, but without, in my opinion, the tools to do so. In my opinion, these tools would include actively working with the specific users of the specific space on an ongoing basis. There are many barriers to this. Municipal budgets are inadequate, but my suggestion is that in South Africa's context, which includes rapid urbanization, even large municipal budgets for public space would not keep up with the demand and they'd be unable to meet the general needs of city residents. And this is found throughout the world. This morning, I'm looking at Reilly Square, which is one public square that is about to become a lot friendlier, cleaner, and safer. It's a public parking area. So not terribly exciting at first glance. It's been designed to function as the main motorized access to all the buildings adjacent to it. And in 2001, the city of Cape Town leased the property out to the current lessee. And in 2017, I began to work with stakeholders to help resolve their disputes. Now, for years, the public parking area had been heavily congested. Here's a picture of a hotel shuttle trying to turn. Needless to say, it was impossible to get anything other than a sedan in there. The leaseholder viewed it as his private property, which is effectively what the lease gave him right to, and he would congest the space, as it was a cash business for him. Obviously, with renting a public facility like a public parking area, you've got lease conditions. These were ignored. With some bad consequences, there was a medical emergency in one of the adjacent hotels, and the ambulance couldn't get through, had to find alternate route. Obviously, the surrounding stakeholders were complaining, but there wasn't really too much effect. The hotel owners started to complain, but the lease was seen as quite watertight, to the point where even the CCID's law enforcement officers were unable to ticket cars parked in front of fire escapes and solid red lines. So you can see there was a distrust forming from the area stakeholders against the city, as they wondered why this leaseholder had gotten away with not fulfilling his conditions for now almost 2 decades. In the meantime, the leaseholder would turn the complaining stakeholders into clients by selling them monthly bays. Now, the arrangement would generally work, but invariably the relationship would deteriorate over time. A new hotel, a Signature Luxe hotel, was built just adjacent to the site last year. and they needed parking for their shuttle bus. As you can see, there was provision made for movement in the front of, or the back of their hotel by the solid red line. The leaseholder suggested the hotel rent the parking bays that he had created there for R3,500 per month per bay. So it's quite a narrow focus on this one particular space as my case study, but just to understand some of the tensions involved in what happens when a lease goes wrong and how it affects adjacent properties and businesses. Now, the hotel owners were between a rock and a hard place, because if you fell out with the lessee, he was known to wheel lock your guests. Now, imagine the online review that you'd get when you found that your wheel was locked and that you wouldn't be getting it unlocked for the rest of the day, maybe tomorrow. So the lessee was also known to present himself at reception areas accompanied by his parking attendant and using intimidating language towards behavior and staff. So when the Friends of Reykjavik Square, so this here's the slide, as a result of agitation by the Friends group that arose out of the square, the Friends of Reykjavik Square started to agitate for a change, and they became aware that the city would be renewing their lease, which is another way of saying the city's trying to improve the rate at which they lease the space. So to do that, they will reevaluate the site, and as part of that process, an alternate proposal window is permitted in terms of the due process. It's a non-competitive, which means a non-commercial bid, and the city will accept ideas that don't make a profit from this space. So the Friends decided to submit an alternate proposal. Obviously, the lessee wasn't happy, and by this stage, I'd been banned from the space. I'd been getting some SMSs from him. But in June 2020, almost 3 years after the initial conversations were held, the sub-council adopted the recommendations that the Friends application be approved, which is, this is a 5-year lease with hopefully the option to renew. Obviously, the rental income of the space is mostly, let me rather say, the amount that the space is predicted to make in terms of parking is the equivalent of the rental fee charged by the city. But there's a big opportunity for the surrounding hotels to cooperate and come up with some new ideas for envisaging the space. And here are just some examples around it. They're looking at a top level between buildings across the top, and then at the bottom, how to treat that nicely. So in my opinion, yeah, that's just my little thank you slide. In my opinion, getting users involved in a meaningful way in the management and maintenance of the space it's much trickier, but I'm wondering where else it doesn't work that way. And to keep people involved, my feeling is to attach it to cash flow to the site. A parking area is a relatively easy example, but users in the municipality need to be creative in how they approach these spaces so that everyone can benefit from them. Thanks. That's the end of my slide, and now it's over to Cara.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks very much. Yeah, I think, as you say, municipality kind of thinking and trying to be innovative is it has to happen. Obviously, the public spaces are not ours. In other words, they belong to the cities. So what I wanted to just take you through, and there's lots of different projects on the go in Durban at the moment. Lots of them interlinked, some of them sort of standing on their own, some affected by COVID, in other words, just sort of trying to pick up again. I think, as we've all experienced, the thing about working in public space, when public space is not the place people want to be, it's tricky, but you know, we're here for the long game. I think all of us for public space management or understanding people in place. This is not for this year or for next year. It's for the long term. So I just thought I would share it's just a brief summary of one of the projects we're working on, which is, sorry, let me share quickly. It is related to the Go Durban transport project, which is, I guess, from a Johannesburg and a Cape Town point of view, it's part of the Integrated Rapid Transportation Network project, the Go Durban. And just briefly, I'm speaking, obviously presenting this in my capacity as a place marketing strategist that's working with different teams on different projects. This one in particular is the eThekwini Transport Authority, as I said, with the Go Durban project, and born and bred leading this project. And basically, at a high level summary, it's a neighborhood mapping exercise. Obviously, I'll go into what that means. And I think what's important here, and Alan, you know, your reference to municipalities and their thinking and trying to get them to see things in a broader context. And I think what's happened with the Transport Authority in Durban and with this Go Durban project is the understanding that it might be a transport project, but the landscape is so much more than transport. And that the importance of engaging the communities along, in this particular instance, we're talking about the C3 corridor, which is the route from Pinetown to Bridge City. And it's about kind of working with communities to understand the needs and the expectations that they have. And I mean, look, none of this is rocket science, to be honest. It's just that the dots are not often connected. So when you do connect them, it's earth-shattering in terms of what comes out, but it really is not rocket science. But it's this understanding that with the transport network, there are various needs. So the people have needs, business obviously has needs, the city has its own needs, and obviously the public transport system itself, in terms of a solution, has certain needs. And it's trying to identify all of those needs and finding the right middle ground. And I think the top left, where the people needs, those have, I kind of think, sort of put on the back burner, because obviously we need the business, we need private sector investment, we need city support, we need sustainable investment and capital investment and precinct management to kind of help us ensure these things happen. But without the people involvement, what's provided in public space is not what people need. You know, municipalities will put up a wonderful gym where actually they needed a clinic. So part of the exercise with the eThekwini Transport Authority was to say to us, okay, we need, and we'll just go here about the project, we need to look towards the safer and livable city, which is obviously the vision for Durban or eThekwini 2030, I think it is now. And it's a collective responsibility that starts not just with active communities where we sort of, but empowered, which doesn't just mean, you know, handing a project over, but creating these enabling structures around them that help these projects, you know, come to a realization. So importantly was this idea of reigniting the neighborhood ownership and pride in those communities along the system. I mean, as you can see, the picture on the right, there's the Go Durban system in the middle of the road, and there's various levels of housing, commercial along that corridor in various states. And I think what's really important is that for the city was that this project is not just seen as some sort of alien coming in and putting in a station, but that it actually has an impact and it resonates on those communities beyond simply the provision of a transport solution, because quite frankly, that's not enough. So the project is aiming to kind of co-create solutions to community challenges with this Go Durban Transport as the service, as a springboard to try and get the change actioned. So in terms of the outputs of this project, again, it's this idea of personal safety, and this was another critical thing. So personal safety and the related nature of social safety and community safety are all very much interlinked. And they're also stepping stones in this journey of unlocking development. So the project was tasked with understanding the safety realities and the community needs of the project neighborhood. So all the way along that C3 corridor, 500 meters of each, within 500 meter space of each station, and 500 meters because the stations are close together in most instances. So it ends up creating this overlapping kind of study area. And we were tasked with literally mapping the physical on-ground status of the space, you know, from potholes to poor pedestrian crossing to bad lighting to dumping to the whole bang shoot, which is pretty common as a place audit. But on top of that was to also then identify the community safety structures or the collectives around those neighborhoods. Who are the CBOs in those areas that are playing a part? Is the area, you know, is there a greater sort of focus on child development in that area? Are the needs related to gender-based violence? What is happening in those specific neighborhoods? And they might be sort of 800 meters apart, but they're very much, very, very specific to the needs in that space. Also to identify as I said, the active people and organizations, create this list of priority interventions around each neighborhood. And I think what was really important in this mapping of the space was it's also the social behavior in that space. Why, for example, is the park next door to the library in Pinetown, Civic Park, why is it called Needle Park? Why are there used hypodermic needles lying everywhere? Why, when we spent that time mapping there, did I see the first thing in my life where people were shooting up drugs? I hadn't seen that before in my life, and maybe I've led a very sheltered life, but that was, you know, and what do we do about that? You know, you can put a lovely bench in that place and you can put some lighting in, and isn't that wonderful? And then what? So, I mean, that's just going into an example. And then importantly, in terms of what David and the team are doing in Joburg, and as Alan was talking about in Cape Town, is this methodology to activate the community. Because we've got structures in the city that allow for some things and they don't allow for other things. And how do you get the landscaper in Avoca to be in charge of doing the landscaping around that space? Can we do it like that? And so that's where we're at on this project. We've done all this interim work and we're now looking at this methodology. So very high level project focus summary for you. Why is this not clicking on now? Hang on. Oh, there we go. And just to take you through this kind of summary of this collaboration for change is this community identifying stakeholders at the top, evaluating the space issues, a vision for the place. Also importantly, I think like David was referring to these sort of short-term experiments or pilot projects to see what works, to see what doesn't, accept that there might be failings in them, take the learnings from them and be a little bit not too scared to try. I think we try and plan to activate something. It takes forever. And by that stage, you know, everyone's lost interest, money's dried up and there's some 500 other priorities. But then to use those experiments for this ongoing reevaluation and long-term improvements. So we're engaging, we've had lots and lots of sessions, one-on-one meetings, group sessions, our neighborhood mapping. Luckily, those things all took place at the beginning of the year. And now obviously we followed up with lots of Zoom and Microsoft Teams sessions and, you know, all of our champions and stakeholders and making sure that we are linking with all the connecting areas of the city, so the Safer Cities Collective, our law enforcement agencies, and it's not easy, and it takes a lot, you know, knocking on the doors and getting in to see people, but it's not asking them for anything, it's asking them just to be part of and have an ear in the discussion. So I just thought I would I mean, there's 12 stations along the corridor, and I just thought I'd take a snapshot for you of Queen Nandi, for example, of how we've mapped it. So this would just be the overview, and then you can see the network or the corridor there from Bridge City to Pinetown, so through Kwamashu. You know, we went into, as I said, physical mapping, and then actually asking community members what they feel like. Where is the anxiety and the fear? What do they want? What are the needs? Where would they like to go to? And getting these pieces of information written down and then pulled into the commentary that runs alongside the ward councillors' commentary, the law enforcement agencies in those areas. So making sure that it's not just a single voice, a ward councillor's voice, for example, which it can be one-sided, I guess, depending on that area, and allowing lots and lots and lots of input. Physically mapping, this is a social map that we did, identifying the safety and the comfort and the enjoyment in the space, red being not good at much, and you can see there's a lot of red there, because part of accessing a public transport network in this case is being able to physically access it. When you're standing there, you know, how does it feel around you? You know, do you feel like you're going to get the rug pulled out from underneath you at any second? What are the elements like? You know, all of that sort of thing that we mapped. And this is one of the interventions that we suggested, and this is, funnily enough, something that we're looking to roll out, or the Transport Authority will be looking to try and activate along the corridor. It's the Siapapalezela grouping, which is an initiative in this area where a group of men have got together, and twice a day, early morning and in the evening, they arrive at the key sort of where the taxis or buses stop, and they gather the women and the children coming back from schoolwork, and they walk them home. And that is a local initiative to ensure safety and comfort. And this is something that, you know, it's must stay as it is. That it needs more support. They need more people involved. If you had more people involved, you could help a bigger group of women, children, anyone else who potentially might be vulnerable at different times of the day and night. But these sorts of things we wouldn't have known. I mean, the ward councillor didn't tell us about this. It was literally walking through the area and chatting to people and finding out, and then ending up in people's homes and discussing and all of those sorts of things. So this is an initiative that is hopefully going to be sort of piloted in a lot of the different nodes too. And on that note, what's also emerged, which wasn't there before, is that in every single node, every single community spoke about these 8 themes. Kind of coordinated policing, so not satellite police stations, but coordinated policing, social gender and social gender inclusion, this community safety through coordinated planning, like the Siapapalezela grouping, universal accessibility. You know, the stations and the buses are designed with full UA compliance. However, once you've followed the textured paving to a point, literally in one of the areas, you follow the textured paving to a point if you were visually impaired, and then there is a huge hole at the end of that particular textured paving where you will fall down a hole that will take you up to your neck. So, you know, universal accessibility beyond the station and beyond the buses, urban furniture, ablutions, I mean, all over. Local employment, and I think we all know that, but local employment as in, can it be ward-based, can it be station-based? And then pedestrian safety was also a huge factor for all of the station areas, station neighborhoods. So where to next? We are busy at the bottom here. This community participation is busy with this methodology for this ward-based community participation to try and activate these interventions. Employment requirements along the intervention project line in terms of safety and place management. And then this final intervention portfolio and activation for city units, because we can't do it on our own. We do need the city units involved at all levels. And that's why they've been brought along this journey, and they are aware and they are interested. So yeah, we are on the ground with this one, and we just have to keep going. But it is exciting, and yeah, so Sleepy Durban has a few things going on. That's me, David and Alan.
Thank you very much, Cara and David, both for your presentations. Yeah, very interesting and lots to unpack. Please somehow make your contact details available to people who want to follow up with any questions afterwards. We've got a couple minutes for questions now. And there was a question from Bella in the chat, and that's a great space to ask a question. So please ask a question in the chat. And perhaps David, you could kick us off have you read it? It's about,
Yeah.
You have. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Bella, for that question. And I think, obviously, trust is just a major. And I would say that three things come to mind. I think the first one is you cannot move forward if you don't have a common objective. So that's extremely important for different stakeholders to agree this is what we're working towards. That I say is number one. Second thing, and it's linked to that, is that there needs to be benefits to all the stakeholders. So, if one party's getting no benefits, then, unless they are, extremely special, kind of humanitarian special, they wouldn't really want to participate further. And I'd say thirdly is relationships. So just to give an example is like, for instance, with the city of Joburg, we have extremely good relationships which have been built up over time. But those relationships aren't across the entire city. So, we have a very good relationship with the inner city office, for instance, and with the JDA. And then, with some other departments and entities, we would work through those existing relationships to also then, forge new relationships with particular departments or entities on specific projects. Thanks.
Yeah, I think, Bella, it's a very important question, and I think what we've found, working on this Go Durban project, which has been on the ground for a long time, and people have been waiting a long time, so the trust has been hard to earn back. But what we've found is, even when we don't have all the answers or we haven't got the full plan yet, showing people that their input has been translated into kind of further thinking. So, for example, some of those portfolio or the interventions that I showed, suddenly they can see themselves in what's coming back at them. So they realize that the value of what they've said has been heard, and they're prepared to, I guess, it's buying time, buying trust. And they're prepared to wait a little bit longer, prepared to kind of give more. And that's why, for me, it's so important, even if the plan is not 1,000% done, like David's work there, where it's like, we're going to try this intervention, we're going to do this, piloting it, trying, making an effort on some level is a huge win for all of us.
We've got a hand from Tlotlejo, who I'm going to ask to unmute. She's having trouble with her keyboard, so she's going to ask us a question. Go for it.
Great, thanks, Alan. I'm going to try to keep it short. My keypad has just been freezing over the last few days. The first one is for Cara. You mentioned that transport isn't the key thing for the community, and one of the emerging themes was around local employment. So my question is, have people in the communities that you worked with, Pinetine and Guamashu, noted wanting informality to be supported? For instance, one of the critiques of the BRT is that it isn't really linking to, in terms of vibrancy and activating communities, allowing informal traders to be stationed there. And because there's foot traffic, there's so much going on there, and how that contributes to a kind of a broader strategy of survival for people in local communities. That's the first one. The second one was for David, who showed the presentation of the city of Johannesburg. And as an inner city kind of resident in Johannesburg, it was just great to see all of those kind of emerging, upcoming initiatives. But my first comment was on when you showed the ideal kind of, what the GICP is aiming for in terms of a walkable city. You showed pictures of things that aren't, South African or in Africa, which it looked like some of those were in the UK or somewhere like that. And then you later on showed a picture of the Jewel City as one of these kind of successful initiatives. And my question was around, and just also highlighting how important imaging is, because there are already kind of walkable streets in Johannesburg. Main Street is one of those, and Kerk Street is one of those, linking onto Bank City. And just highlighting, this idea of the good city being a sanitized city, which is another thing that CIDs like Ekaya have been critiqued for, sanitizing the city, whether it's from, by removing people that are informal or quote unquote loitering. So I think the imaging is really important when you show walkable paths, to not only show these ideals that aren't attainable, but to show things that are already happening, like, Gag Street, which is vibrant and it's a market street. And I suppose people wouldn't think of it as this kind of a sanitized, clean space. And then the other question is around why the start was to extend Maboneng in the form of Jewel City, as opposed to targeting other critical areas of the inner city where there are, recognized safety issues, for instance, in the CBD area. And then also leading on to Hillbrow. Of course, Hillbrow has CIDs like Ekaya, which you've shown in the slides. There's also Lekhaye, but there are also constantly emerging issues around safety and security. And why weren't those, particular streets in those areas targeted? Because there are lower levels of success there, whereas Maboneng is known to be kind of exclusive. It's a nice commercial space, but not everybody can access it. People who don't have money cannot enjoy Maboneng, and an extension of Jewel City, they cannot enjoy that either. Braamfontein is a kind of it's a youth space, and there's an improvement district there, and it's a lot more inclusive because of the kind of young community that's there because of the university. But in places that are highly residential, like Hillbrow and Yeoville, where there are CIDs, why haven't those specific places being a lot more targeted by the GICP to kind of improve overall safety and inclusivity, which I think is one of the things that you'd highlighted in your presentation, inclusive and safe. So
Great,
not
thanks
just
very much, Katlego. If I could jump in, we're going to wrap up
Hello.
at 10, so we've got just a couple of minutes to answer those interesting questions. Go ahead, David and Cara.
Thanks. I think that it's really your question around the secondary economies along that corridor is critical. And I think there's that balance between the need to manage the space, as you say, sanitize, which is a very, it's one of those base level functions in the sort of traditional hierarchy of precinct management. And I think that the job then is to find that middle ground. And I think what's happening as a result of this project is exactly what you're saying, identifying, as I said, different station neighborhoods have different needs. Avoca, for example, has got one sort of informal tuck shop. There's much more required there. You're not going to ever have a big commercial shopping center there. So how does the secondary economy participate and cater to those people who need that type of retail, for example? And so those are the things that are being identified all the way along the corridor. They had a very successful kind of employment structure when it came to the construction of the Go Durban stations, and a similar thinking is going to be used around kind of the intervention development. But absolutely the secondary economy from Pinetown in Hill Street, which is just, full up, all the way through to KwaMashu, it's a key element to it, definitely.
David, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, let me try and answer those difficult questions. So firstly, I agree with you on the. I'm not sure if I agree with the word sanitization. I think that would be dependent on your kind of own worldview. But I take that point, and I do agree that it's probably better to work towards a mix of profiling in terms of creating the kind of ideal state, if you like. So there definitely are very good examples of walkability in places such as Morocco, for instance. So absolutely. And just by the way, those images were probably about 60% Joburg images and 40%, some best practices, but we'll look, I think what we should do is we'll look for some other best practices from areas that aren't, from Europe and America. Then on the, why did we choose Maboneng? We didn't choose Maboneng. So basically, and by the way, Hillbrow, all of those areas are included in the Walkable Network. I did show that one map. Perhaps I can briefly show it again, just to illustrate the point. let's give me a moment. So if you look at this, map, this is the map of the walkable network, and you'll see that, you know, these are all of these, the blues and the reds are the walkable network. We just decided to start off with a pilot with Maine and Jaber. So just to, you know, to make that clear. But the reason that we chose Village East, which is bigger than Maboneng, it includes, you know, Fashion District, all of those areas going to APSA, is because it made sense. We have an existing stakeholder group that's part of Village East. And for that reason, you know, and I think all of us have been talking about that, is when we choose a pilot, it's probably best not to look at the technical issues, but to look at the people. You know, so if you have a strong group already talking about improvement, and that's what we then chose, is to say, let's use Village East, and then for that one component of the pilot. So I think that's hopefully, perhaps just one last thing is, it's not a GICP project. GICP is coordinating, but it's very much a project that is owned by, you know, all of those stakeholders that were mentioned, including the city, including property owners, including civil society. And as we go on, we will be, as I said, increasing our engagement with civil society. Thanks.
Great, thanks everyone. I know that there are, Louis, you had a question. We have got to our time. And so just to respect that, if you need to leave, you're welcome to. But I'm going to be here for a couple more minutes, and I'd be happy to chat. So Louis, go ahead with your question. Let's keep going for 5 more minutes, and then we can wrap it up once the questions have dried out. Go ahead, Louis.
Hi there, guys. Thanks a lot for the presentation. Very interesting talking points. Just on, I'm a town planner from Paul, and we've been in engagement about specifically placemaking and rethinking of Lady Grey Street. So if you're not aware of Lady Grey, if you go through the main road of Paul, it's kind of in the CBD of the Paul section. And now we've been in a lot of engagement talks, specifically how to get private investors invested there, and also to ensure that the informal sector and the formal sector are kind of balanced out. So we were speaking about how to redirect traffic and kind of make that a walkable street. Now my question is, where David alluded on quick wins versus long-term success, specifically in that regard, because there's a lot of, how for instance, do you stop something such as versus including local street vendors and local food vendors in that regard, and how do you design or engage in that street to ensure that you do not do quick wins just for now, but ensure long-term success, and also in climate, investors and market change and so forth. And there's a few points in that sense, but it was kind of something for the past 5-6 years, and nobody could really establish how ready to ensure local and international success in terms of creating funds to invest in that area, and that local economic development is pushed within that boundary, and not ensuring that it's not gentrified in a sense where we create high income groups that only use that space. Yeah.
I'm sure all of us have a particular answer to that, but I'll give you my brief one. And yeah. I think it's a good question. I don't think there are easy answers to this.
Yes.
What I will say is that if you don't have, or let me put it this, you should start with the end. You should have your long-term objective, and all stakeholders should agree to that long-term objective. With that firmly in place, one could then, step by step, experiment. We've been using the word living lab, is something that we'd like to create in the Walkable Network. UJ is also, we've been discussing with UJ, for instance, they've got some e-bikes that we'd like to put out there. So in all of this experimentation, some things will work, others won't work. But as long as I believe that the long-term objective is shared and doesn't change too much, I think it's okay if it changes, but not too much, then it should over time, come together. But thanks for that question.
Great.
I also think, sorry, I mean, just to add, Louis, I think it's those bite-sized chunks. Again, I mean, and we want it to be right across the board, but it's okay sometimes if those bite-sized chunks are dealt with. And I mean, like David says, the choice for where they're starting their pilot is the will of those people. Sometimes it can also be the ability to achieve it, to make it a success. So even if it's the easiest thing, rather do it, because the success can lead to the next step, no matter how small it is. And I think that ironically, because many of our urban spaces are quite messy, any success is incredibly well received, which we got to use that to our advantage, because it really does then give us an opportunity to kind of do some good stuff that doesn't have to be, bank breaking. So yeah, I think it's just those little interventions that then build the incremental change.
Great. Thank you. I think it's a good time to wrap up. There are no further questions indicated. And yeah, thanks to Urban Festival for the platform, and to Cara and David for your time and expertise and contributing to the session. Just to let everyone know that this session has been recorded and will be available on the website. And obviously there's much more information about the upcoming presentations and webinars on the Urban Festival 2020 website as well. So thank you very much and have a good morning.
Thank you, you too. Bye everyone.